Welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. For today's special episode, we're going to be Gladiator exclusive. We're going to talk all about the Jeep Gladiator with two guys who were among the first in the world to drive it. That means joining me today on the phones from the West Coast, our senior editor, Alex Kierstein, and consumer editor, Jeremy Korzeniewski. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good? You drove the Gladiator, so you must be doing pretty well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, kind of an interesting setup. Jeremy did the first drive of the Gladiator, which is cool. He got to do all the things you do on a full press trip where, you take it off road. It's a pretty formatted program, if you will. There's dinners, there's executives. They're a lot of fun, but there's definitely there's a schedule to follow. Then Alex and our camera crew drove this thing. They drove it for a couple days, and it was basically a choose-your-own-adventure road trip. So I think at this point, we know the vehicle really, really well. These two guys are the experts. So Jeremy, let's start off with you. You did, the button-down press trip. Story's up there. If you're listening to this, you got to go check out Jeremy's review. It's very comprehensive. The embargo was a pretty quick turnaround, so we lost a little bit of sleep as far as writing it. But just quick thumbnail, what did you think of the Gladiator?
My first impression is they're going to sell a ton of these things. I think there's so much pent-up demand for this Jeep pickup truck. And I think it's the right vehicle coming at the right time. I saw an interesting statistic when I was doing some preparation for writing up this review and doing the first drive. One of the most cross-shopped vehicles on the Jeep Wrangler is the Toyota Tacoma. So clearly there's been a lot of people looking into the Wrangler, looking at Jeeps, also considering pickup trucks. Now you've got this vehicle that's coming in and converging directly onto that marketplace, right into the heart of the market. They have a Tacoma-sized Jeep pickup truck. And it comes really close to offering everything that everyone could possibly want, I think. It's not perfect. One thing that could potentially hurt it, I think, is when you're looking at all of the off-road specs. It is class-leading in almost every category. Ground clearance, by far, the greatest. Approach angle, the greatest. Departure angle, the greatest. But taking it on the off-road course indicated to me that people are going to be dragging the bottoms of these things a lot. Now, the good news is the underbody is fully protected with all the skid plates and armor that you would expect. The bad news is that rock rails are only standard on the Rubicon. So I could see some potential instances where people buy these Gladiators, like a Sport S, maybe even the Overland. They go into some off-road scenarios just assuming that they've got all the clearance in the world. For the most part, they do, but I can see some damaged underbody work, and specifically, I think some of the lower part of the pickup truck bed and then behind the rear wheels. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw a lot of damaged Gladiators driving around with big dents and scars in those spots. So as a cautionary warning, if you do plan on going off-roading in this thing, know that the wheelbase is very long. Know that there's some potential issues with the breakover angle. And if you're going to be doing it, invest in some good bolt-on rock rails so that those take the damage off-road as opposed to the actual bodywork. Now, that said, the vast majority of people are not going to be putting their Gladiators to the kind of off-road tests that Jeep gave us on our first drive. They took us on some, it's not like Rubicon Trail stuff, but it was very muddy, very rocky, very rutted. Most people are never going to do that. They want to know that they can, but they're not going to. So no big deal. For the actual things that truck buyers are going to do with the Gladiator, which 95% of the time is just drive it for daily driving and errand running and commuting. But even the less likely usage case scenarios of towing big loads, filling up the bed with all kinds of cargo, it's going to do really, really well. The bed is only 5 foot, where a lot of the competitors offer a larger 6-foot bed. But I don't think that it's going to be that big of a deterrent. I think a lot of people are going to find that it's just the right size for them. I think as I started out this ramble, they are going to sell these things by the bucket load.
All right, so let's bring Alex in. Tell us a little bit about your adventure. You got to do kind of the unscripted drive-away side of this, which sounds like a lot of fun, obviously. Take us through a little bit about what your experience was like.
Sure. So basically right after Jeremy took off from that trip, we grabbed one of the Jeeps that was there. And so we started in Sacramento. And then we drove all the way out to Moab, hung out in Moab for a little while, and then drove up to Denver. So it was a lot of driving. It was about 1,200 miles worth of driving in 3 days. But a lot of that was the first day. We went for like 18 hours and did something like 800 miles with a few stops. So, excuse me, it was intense. The other thing is we had an overland model. So, I was a little disappointed at first. Everyone wants to drive the Rubicon, and we had an overland automatic. And, I was wondering if we were going to be disappointed by the luxury-oriented, less aggressive model. But in some ways, it was probably good. It was surprisingly comfortable. We drove a long distance with 3, full-grown adults in it, and we were tired every time we pulled into where we were going to sleep. But no one was, the seats didn't hurt anybody. No one was super uncomfortable. If anyone's taken a long trip in an old TJ with a soft top or something, or a YJ, even worse, and rolled into wherever they were going completely deaf, you'd be shocked about how civilized the cab is. So, making it sound like it was a real, maybe too civilized, a little too soft. But once we got to Moab, we did what I would describe as a realistic amount of off-roading. We didn't hit any obstacles. We weren't going on any difficult trails. But I was just describing this to somebody else. The way we used it is how I would imagine that I would use, how I use my Toyota Tacoma, my personal truck. I want to use it to get up to the trailhead, and then I'll go do other stuff. But I don't need the truck to go do the hardest possible things on the. It just needs to get up the Forest Service road, cross the stream, go through a little bit of snow, and get me to where I'm going. And the cool thing about the Gladiator is it's got a big truck bed. So you can take, a couple dirt bikes, a quad, a drop-in camper, a rack with a rooftop tent on it. I'm sort of jumping ahead to the conclusions, but basically that is how I determined the best use of the Gladiator was. And I think the Overland fills that remarkably well. We just... it never got stuck. We got high-centered once. Just spotter wasn't looking at the right place. But yeah, it did just as good as my mostly stock Tacoma does in every other situation, and better in quite a few. You can't beat the approach angle for sure. The approach angle is nuts. So, yeah. I feel like I just gave you the 10,000-foot view of my entire trip, but that's kind of my initial spiel on the Gladiator.
That's so I've seen some of the videos from that already. One of our producers who's in this office, Alex Malberg, was showing me some of the shots, and it's truly breathtaking, the places you could go in this thing. So obviously it looks like both of you guys had a lot of fun. I'm curious to know, I guess we could get to this at the end. I'll let you guys kind of percolate on this. If this truck did live up to the hype, because this is easily one of the most anticipated reveals, product launches, first drives that we've had in recent memory. It's truly been, the buildup has been spectacular. But before we get to that, because obviously we want everybody to keep listening here, don't want to give away the final verdict, but I'm curious, you guys basically tested similar powertrains, as I understand it, right? And it's the Pentastar is what's available at launch, and then some other versions are going to be coming out later. What did you guys think of the powertrain?
You know what? I think in my drive review, I referred to it as sufficient, and I think that's about the qualifier I'd want to use.
Okay.
It's 285 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque. I drove it first with the 8-speed automatic transmission, and I thought, this isn't that bad. I was expecting it to feel a little sluggish. I've driven some Wrangler Unlimiteds. You put big wheels and tires on them, jack them up a little bit, and especially when you get up to highway speeds, they're already sluggish. And the Gladiator's a little bit larger, a little bit heavier, especially in Rubicon trim. It's quite a bit heavier. It's 5,000 pounds, something like that. So I guess I hate to suggest that I was expecting to be underwhelmed, but if I was expecting to be underwhelmed by the powertrain, I was pleasantly surprised because it's totally fine. It's not gonna people aren't gonna get in it and feel like this thing is just dog slow, can't get out of its own way. I did also spend a very significant amount of time in the 6-speed manual. If I were buying one, I think I would seriously consider the manual. I'd want to drive both. I wouldn't go straight in saying, you know what, manual or bust, that's all I'm going to get, because the 8-speed automatic is quite good. A couple thoughts about the manual transmission, and I'm not sure if Alex got any time testing one or not. So the Pentastar is not super torquey at low RPM. You got to build some revs to get good power out of that 3.6 liter V6. I stalled the Gladiator, I don't know, 3-4 times over the course of the first couple hours driving it. And I drive manual transmissions all the time. I don't remember what the last time it was that I stalled something, and it speaks to the low, like the not great torque curve. You really got to build some revs, which seems a little bit incongruous in an off-road vehicle like a Wrangler or a Gladiator. You kind of get into it and you expect like stump pulling torque right off the bat. So I think it would take a little bit of time to get used to driving it every single day. But once I just got used to giving it a little bit more gas off the line than I had initially expected to, it was totally fine. The transmission itself shifts well. I don't think people buy Wranglers or potentially the Gladiator thinking of the sheer enjoyment of driving a manual transmission like they would in a Miata or a Shelby Mustang or a Corvette or something like that, or a Porsche. It's not the same kind of manual buyer, but I also think it's crucial that they offer it, and I think the take rate on it will be pretty decent. I think a lot of people are going to be coming in looking for it. And I also think it's noteworthy that there's a $2,000 surcharge for the 8-speed automatic over the 6-speed manual. That's a good chunk of money. So when buyers are cross-shopping and looking at their various pickup truck options, if you're looking at the automatic, add $2,000 to the base prices that you're seeing, and if you're trying to do some comparison shopping. But yeah, that said, still probably I'd stick with the manual transmission. Just get used to revving it out a little bit more than you expect.
I think that's an interesting point there, because I've driven a lot of manual transmission Wranglers, and it's I found it to be a little bit challenging. I did the Rubicon in a manual Wrangler with the Pentastar, and this is quite a few years ago now, but I believe it's essentially the same two elements there, and it was challenging to the point, like you said, I know how to drive a stick shift, but it was like I was stalling the thing, and it gets to the point where you're almost like, I'm here to really enjoy the trail and enjoy the experience, not try to do like, driver's ed with a stick shift. Could I have been better? Sure, of course. I'm sure there's more skilled trail masters than me, but it's a different dynamic, I think, for the, the Wrangler and the Gladiator for sure. And, as I kind of look at like, well, hey, which Gladiator would I want? And we'll get to that during Spend My Money. That's ended up being a kind of a big thing for me, is I kept thinking, the 8-speed's a great transmission. I know it would be perfect for around town. It would be easier, and that's not to be a cop-out, but it's just, I think there's certain vehicles you want, that really engaging manual in. Like I drove a Mazda 3 at lunch today and loved every second of it with the manual. I'm kind of thinking with the Gladiator and the Wrangler, that may be, it's just a different feel, that's for sure. Now, Alex, you mentioned you had the automatic as well. It doesn't sound like you got any manual time, but what are your thoughts on this kind of debate, if you will?
I'm 100% in agreement with Jeremy. I think the Pentastar V6 is fine, but it doesn't sound great. You do have to rev it out to get any power out of it. And it's just, the turbo diesel that's coming is going to be it's going to be the engine that you want in this vehicle. Full stop. It's going to be torquey. It's going to be fuel efficient. It'll match the character of the truck quite a bit better. As for the transmission, I didn't drive the manual. I've driven some JK Wrangler manuals, and I'm a manual guy. I like manuals. My truck's a manual. My Subaru's a manual. In fact, everything I bought for myself is a manual, and I generally prefer it. But the automatic is great. It's I can't think of a single instance when I was driving this Overland trim Gladiator that I wanted a manual. I don't know that I wanted to spend $2,000 more to get the manual. I think the price difference is a little bit crazy, but so yeah, it'd be kind of a tough thing. I think and I don't remember offhand, maybe Jeremy knows. Do you know if the diesel V6 is going to be automatic only? I assume it will be. I
assume it will be. Yeah, and just to clarify, it's $2,000 more for the automatic over the manual.
Right.
Yeah, but just making sure we stated that properly. And I do believe you're right. The diesel is going to be 8-speed automatic only.
So the bottom line is, I wouldn't choose the Pentastar in order to get the manual transmission, but I am unhappy that the price difference between the manual and the automatic is so extreme. Also, to get the taller axle ratio if you want it, and to get the max towing capacity, you need to have the automatic. So it basically seems like Jeep is really trying to push you into the automatic, but they're also siphoning a lot of money out of your pocket to do that. And we can get to this later, but it's no surprise that the Gladiators are really expensive to begin with. And so you throw an automatic in there, and it's already an expensive truck. Having to slap another $2,000 onto it is really frustrating, frankly.
Yeah, I agree with everything Alex just said, and I bet you, as we're having this debate, that there's several people who are listening right now shaking their heads or hands in frustration, saying, "Well, you guys just don't know how to drive a stick." It's not that. We all drive manual transmissions. We're very, very familiar with it. The only car I own, my wife's got an automatic, but the only car that I own is a stick shift. And everything that I've ever bought myself has been a stick shift. And I witnessed maybe 5 other people getting in the Gladiators and driving them off, and there were several stalls. So, but again, you would get used to it, and I wouldn't let it be a deterrent if I wanted the manual transmission. I think it's just, you got to kind of reset your expectations, and you'd have to get used to driving it. Give it 2 weeks driving the thing every single day, and your muscle memory will take over, and you'll totally get used to it. But definitely know you're not going to be short shifting the thing. You're not going to be up into third gear at 20 miles an hour. You got to build some torque with that 3.6 liter V6 gasoline engine. And I also think Alex is spot on that the diesel is going to be the one that people want. With one caveat, I don't believe that the diesel is going to have a higher tow rating than the Pentastar comes with. So the max tow, correct me if I'm wrong, is 7,650 pounds. Is that right? Is that what it is?
I'm looking at the towing. Yeah, it's 7,650.
Yeah, I think that max tow is going to be with the Pentastar automatic max tow package, so the higher ratio gear. And I don't think that the diesel is going to surpass that. We'll see. They haven't listed numbers specifically yet, but yeah, I don't think if people are waiting for the diesel to think like, well, I'm going to get a better tow rating or something. It might be more comfortable towing, but it's not going to have a higher rating.
Cool. That's a lot of good points. The point I think all three of us are trying to make is we're trying to be kind of real here. Like, we've all driven manuals in like every condition imaginable. And I think we all love manual transmissions. But in the Gladiator, it can be a bit of a tricky situation. And then to get the automatic, you got to pay an extra $2,000. So, that's not ideal. It is what it is. And I think as you look at the packaging, there's going to be a lot of people who just love the Gladiator and say, God, I got to have one of those. And they will have no idea how to drive a manual. So I think that's where Jeep's going to be pretty smart here, actually. They're going to pocket an extra $2,000 because people will say, I got to have that truck. And then, they'll start speccing it out. And it's like, oh, well, geez, okay, I'm not really good with a manual, or I don't drive a manual. Extra $2,000, boom. There's your profit margin right there for Jeep. So, a number of ways to look at it. A third powertrain option that I'm pretty psyched about, and they haven't really confirmed this, but we know the Wrangler is going to get a plug-in electric model at some point. They haven't said exactly when, probably sometime after 2020. And they have confirmed that. They haven't been totally specific. So I think we could extrapolate that the Gladiator will also get likely that form of electrification as well. So I'm excited about that. I think that could make for some interesting situations on the trail. You could even use it to power some of your equipment, your campsite, things like that. So I'm excited about that. I think that will add a real different vibe. It'll make electrification cool in a different way. Sure, Teslas are great, but you offer somebody an electric Gladiator or Wrangler, and that's kind of a cool proposition. So that's something else that's coming down the pike, and I think will be cool. It's something Jeep has made kind of said that they're going to do electrification. It's going to be perhaps they might be among FCA's brands that are really carrying the standard on that. So I think that's cool. That would just make Jeep basically even stronger in their portfolio. So. Moving along a little bit, why don't we talk just a little bit about the design very quickly. It's no real surprises here. From the pictures, obviously people love this thing. It's got very much the Wrangler front end. The back, is a truck, to be quite simply. Underneath it, the frame is different. It's a ladder type frame. I'm curious, just you guys have seen it. I've seen it at auto shows, obviously, but on the road in real life situations, what's the vibe for this thing?
So from a design standpoint, I'm a big fan of this thing. I really like the way that it looks. I think they did a really good job of doing more than just grafting a truck bed onto the back of a Wrangler and calling it good. I have two styling hangups. The first one is the rear doors. They have a very significant angle on the lower rear edge of the doors, and that's because they're basically cribbed from the Wrangler Unlimited that has a much shorter wheelbase. There's plenty of room that Jeep could have put larger rear doors or larger rear openings into a Gladiator. The only good explanation as to why they didn't is to save money. They wanted to reuse some of the engineering work that they had already had on the Wrangler Unlimited. And so these are the doors that we get, the rear doors that we get on the Gladiator. I don't love that. The other thing that I don't, I'm just, it's not that I think it's a big problem, but the soft top on the Gladiator, when you fold it back, it's really hanging out there in the wind. Take a look online, go through all of our photo galleries, find some videos, and find some footage showing the fabric soft top in its folded down, while it's folded down, and you'll see it's almost like the thing that I was reminded of growing up with old air-cooled Volkswagens is the way that the top of an old Beetle kind of bustles into the back and hangs off like a spoiler. The Gladiator soft top kind of does something similar, except mounted really high and off the back of the passenger compartment. It's a little bit funny looking. I noticed it while we were driving, and I specifically made a point to ask Jeep, is aerodynamically that's hanging out there in the wind. Have you done testing to make sure that there's no issues driving a Gladiator at its top speed on the highway on a windy day with that top hanging off there like that? And they said, no, there's not. There's no speed warning. There's no anything like that. Everything is fine. It's just a little bit funny looking. Now, let's be fair. The majority of people aren't going to be putting the top back all the time and, hitting the highways and driving, putting the doors off, putting the windshield down, all that kind of stuff. We love the fact that you can do those things, but as an ex-Jeep owner, I'm here to tell you, you're not going to do it as much as you think you will. So it's not that big of a deal. And if it really bothers you, opt for the hardtop. And the hardtop is really good. It comes off in multiple pieces. You can leave like the majority of it on, the big heavy part, and the parts that just go over the passenger compartment above the driver and passenger, those pop off separately. And of course, in a Gladiator, there's plenty of room that you can store them, or you can leave them in your garage at home, whatever. So yeah, if you're in the market for a Gladiator, check out the soft top. Before you sign on the dotted line, fold it all down, take off the rear glass, or not glass, the rear plastic window. It comes off in 3 pieces. The back piece slides in separately along a little rail at the top and then clips into the bottom. And then the 2 side corner pieces come off as separate items. Do all of that before choosing the soft top. If you find that that's a really big pain, you're already spending a heck of a lot of money on the Gladiator. What's a little bit more to get the hard top? Check it out and see if you like that.
Good point. Good point. I'm pretty curious too now for both you guys, because you did spend a lot of time with this. Biggest surprise from the Gladiator. We'll start with you, Alex.
I was surprised about how civilized it was, honestly. On the freeway, the noise level inside. Now our Overland model had the hardtop. But I was expecting wind noise and tire noise and just the fatigue that hits you if you spend hours and hours and hours in a loud vehicle. I mean, I had a first generation Miata forever with a soft top. And, you spend enough time in that and it just wears on you. You physically might not be tired, but just all that noise gets to you. And anyone that has an old Jeep knows about that. And, if you're trying to make a lot of miles to get to the trail, like we were, you got an 800-mile day and you want to wake up the next morning and hit the trail, it's a factor, So I was surprised about how civilized it was. I was also frankly surprised about how much I like it, because I'm very much a function above form kind of guy. And so the two-door Wrangler is definitely the thing that appeals to me most in the Wrangler line. It's the shortest wheelbase, the most capability, the least amount of metal to ding up on the trail. It gives you the best package. But, I also like pickups. I have a Tacoma. I like having a bed. And despite the really, awful breakover angle, like I was saying earlier, thinking about how I would really use a vehicle, I'm much more likely to want to haul a bunch of camping stuff up to the trailhead and go camping than I am to actually, crawl over a bunch of boulders. That's not really how I use my truck. So the Gladiator matches my personal use case, and I think a lot of people's use case. It's a better dual-purpose vehicle. It's a 4-door, so you can seat 5 adults in there. Carry plenty of stuff. We had the roll up tonneau cover, so it was basically like we had a giant trunk that kept our stuff dry. It worked really well. Now, that being said, I don't know that I like it as much as a dual purpose suburban adventure. If you think about how even someone that uses their truck to go camping all summer really uses that vehicle, if you look at the entire year, something like the Tacoma or the Ranger or, even the Frontier might be a better compromise, because where the Gladiator falls apart is its ride, really the ride quality. I mean, to some degree, you got 2 solid axles, you have, all suspension is a set of compromises, right? To give this thing as much off-road capability as possible, you make some compromises in the way that the suspension is set up and designed. What it means is, we were out west where the speed limits are high, 80-mile-an-hour speed limits, especially getting into Colorado. The road's a little frost-heaved and stuff, and the steering's not super great. There's a bit of a dead spot. It's accurate. You're always you got soft suspension, a little bit of play in the steering. You introduce a little motion into the car. You hit a bump and the thing's sort of already kind of doing the shimmy. And then you hit another big bump and it gets a little sketchy. So I'm surprised by the ride quality in general, but, if you're driving it at night and you're already a little tired, speed limits are high, hit a bump, it'll scare you a little bit. I don't know how else to describe it. So, that was kind of a surprise too. I think it's overall a good compromise. You get a lot of Wrangler capability and you get some pickup truck utility. But I think if there's a lot of long miles in your future, if your use case is, I'm going to take a 2-day road trip to my fishing hole, and most of that's on the slab, I'd look at another truck. I think you're going to get in a lot fresher and happier in a Wrangler or a Tacoma than a Gladiator. If if you are one of those lucky people in California where you can just drive out the back of your property and you're on BLM land and you can drive for 100 miles off-road, I can't imagine a better vehicle than the Gladiator. For everyone whose use case falls in between, I take a long test drive. I really would. Test drive's usually short. You get on the freeway, you take the next exit, you get off. See if you can get an extended, see if you can get 20 or 30 minutes on the freeway. See if you can hit a rough patch of pavement. Make sure it works for you, because it can be a little spooky.
Cool. Jeremy, your biggest surprise?
So Alex makes a lot of good points there. I was surprised by how it legitimately worked as a truck. You think the idea of okay, is a Wrangler with a pickup truck bed, it's going to be so compromised. And it is. Every vehicle is a compromise to some extent. But I did get to tow with it. I towed a 5,500 pound Airstream. Got up to speed. The engine's working. It's like we were alluding to earlier. You got to rev that engine to get torque. So it wasn't short shifting, and it didn't feel super comfortable at all times. But got up to speed, no problem. So it's a legitimate truck. I'm not going to say that I'm surprised, but if it was a surprise, it's a pleasant surprise. The other thing is the pricing. They hadn't given us pre-information. We didn't know what the pricing was going to be until we sat down and they ran us through a presentation. I was pleasantly surprised by the base price. It's $33,500, something like that. You add $1,500 for destination. You're basically looking at $35,000 for the base vehicle. I was prepared for a higher starting price than that. So I think that that's fair. The flip side of it, I was surprised at just how expensive this thing can get. You start start out with a Rubicon. Start adding, a lot of the really nice options that a lot of people are going to want. The big Uconnect screen, the trail camera system, all these cool things that they offer, and you're like, oh, I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that. You start checking boxes, and you pass $50,000 pretty quickly. So I think that there's going to be a lot of sticker shock for people who go in. They're going to be enticed by this base price that might have been a little bit lower than they thought it might be. They're going to see this number, $33,500, and they're going to show up to the dealership. They're going to take a test drive for one. They're going to sit down and talk money. Find out that the one they just test drove was $55,000, and feel like they just got bait and switched on that. So. Yeah, pricing was a little surprising on both ends of the spectrum. Both the reasonable base price, at least what I think is a reasonable base price, and the kind of the other extreme. And there's a launch edition that they told us about at the last minute too. That is going to cost over $60,000. That sounds expensive, but that is basically the price of a fully loaded Gladiator Rubicon. They're not really charging anything extra for those, first edition badges or anything else like that. Maybe a little bit, but not that much. So yeah, there's going to be some $60,000 Gladiators driving around, and that's real high. That's a surprisingly expensive figure.
It's a lot of coin for a Jeep, even though it's definitely capable, and certainly it's a style statement at this point too. A couple things here before we wrap up. Either one of you guys do camping with the Gladiator?
No, I didn't. We only had about a half day in Moab based on our schedule,
Okay.
and it was plenty of time to, it was really enough time to check it out and see what I could do in terms of light duty trails and have some fun. Look at the scenery, but that is one thing. After spending the time in it, I would have loved to, get a rack and a rooftop tent and see what it would be like to, to actually get out there and then spend the whole night with the truck and get that sort of experience. It certainly, there's enough room for gear underneath it to make it doable, and there's plenty of room in the cab if the weather gets lousy and you need to hide out. So I'd love to. I would absolutely love to. Jeremy, did you get to?
No, I didn't. In the past, I used to own a pickup truck, and I did some truck bed camping with it, where you literally, throw out a little inflatable mattress in the truck bed, lay out under the stars with your sleeping bag. I love that. The Gladiator's bed is only 5 foot. Put the tailgate down, you're at 6.5 foot. There's not, for people out there thinking they're going to do some tailgate camping or truck bed camping, just take into consideration the size of the truck bed. It's not super big. But yeah, I'm totally with Alex. I'd love to use the Gladiator as a mount for, a long, week-long camping trip, picking up camp, moving over and over and over again. I think I would do it either with a rooftop tent, like Alex said, or with a regular tent, finding some good, solid flat ground. And I think what I'm seeing now is that we have the makings for a great future story featuring the Gladiator, what it's like to camp.
Yeah, I think that would be one of the top things I would want to do with the Gladiator, actually. When I choose to do my off-roading, I tend to be more of a trail guy. I like the mud and the trees as opposed to the rocks. Rocks are fine too, but kind of more at one with nature as opposed to, scaling the side of a cliff. But that, I guess, brings us to the 2 more segments here. We'll end up with a verdict, but before we do that, we're going to spend some money. In this case, we're going to spend our money. How would you spec out a Jeep Gladiator? Jeremy, you pulled this together on the site. Went up yesterday. It's up there right now. And basically, it's kind of a fun exercise. We do this for a lot of vehicles. The configurator goes up, and we just kind of go spec out what we would do. So, Jeremy, how would you spec one of these out if you were going to put one in your garage?
I would go one of 2 ways, and I don't mean to make this into a cop-out. But I think there's two logical ways that I see to spec a Gladiator for my own personal use. One, as a bare bones weekend fun getaway vehicle. If that were the case, I'd go sport. I'd get rid of, I wouldn't choose any of the extra electronic features or anything else like that. I'd stick with the 6-speed manual transmission, stick with the soft top. It's got USB ports, so I can plug my phone in and have navigation that way if I need it. So I wouldn't option it with anything really. Minus, I would go, I'd put the trailer, the towing package with. Now, I should mention that with the 6-speed manual, your towing doesn't come anywhere near to the max tow rating of the Gladiator. I think it's a maximum of maybe 4,000 pounds with the 6-speed. But I wouldn't be towing big trailers anyway. So yeah, that's the direction I'd go if I wanted to spec it out as a weekend warrior getaway vehicle. And that makes a lot of sense to me. If I was going to use it as a daily driver, I'd get an Overland. I'd get I'd strongly consider that 8-speed automatic. I would option it up with at least Chrysler's 7-inch or Jeep's 7-inch Uconnect, so that I could have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. I'd put some good options on it, the kind of things that I think I'm actually going to want. And that's how I built my my Gladiator and the configurator that we ran. I was in the mid $40,000 range with a nicely optioned Gladiator Overland.
Nice. The way I landed was, I think you chose a little more savvy, a little more wisely than I did, because the one I picked out, I was trying to stay cheap, but I ended up at $43,815, and all I added was the cold weather pack, which gets you the heated seats and things like that. Spray and bed liner, which I don't know, that could go either way, but just yesterday that was kind of my mood, and I went with the automatic transmission. And otherwise I had a very, very basic truck, the gray paint. Nothing very flashy here, but like you, I was a little bit surprised at how quickly you could sort of, layer on the options and get to the early to mid $40,000 range. But I was also pleasantly surprised to see that if you're willing to take it in its, sort of most basic, purest form, you could get one in the low to mid 30s, which is, respectable. So that's where I landed. Alex, I know you didn't get a chance to spec one out because you were still driving the Gladiator and coming back from one. So that's entirely reasonable. But, just roughly, which model would you go with?
Well, I was playing with the configurator earlier, and in general, I'll preface this by saying I initially had some sticker shock. But then, if you spec a new Ranger 4-door, 4x4 with the FX4 package and really nothing else, you're already at $35 asking price, MSRP. So when I did a base sport, green color, manual transmission, mostly because $2,000 seems like a lot to me to get a transmission that I probably would choose if it was a no-cost option. I did the track lock rear diff, the light-duty tow package, the hard top, and the spray and bed liner. Those were sort of the major options. And that was, the Sport starts at $33,500 before destination. I added just under $3,000 worth of options. So with destination, the MSRP is $37,800. And that's okay. I'm not super unhappy with that. The truck is so capable out of the box with the command track that I don't think upgrading the Rubicon just to get the rock track is worth it. And as anyone that's familiar with Jeep knows, the aftermarket's going to fill in every other limitation. You can get aftermarket lockers, a lift, better tires. There's really nothing that rock rails. There's really nothing that I need to get from Jeep or Mopar beyond this. So that's kind of where I landed.
Cool. So. I think this makes me want to go back and respec out a Jeep, because I feel like the one I did ended up having less things on it that I wanted for more money than what you guys described. So I don't know. But either way, very excited about this vehicle. That's how we would spend our money on this. We will close with a bit of a verdict here. Do you guys think this measured up? And just in the context of all of the hype that surrounded this, all of the teasers, all of the spy shots, all of the site traffic, so many people were interested in this. You guys have both driven it, and we'll start with you, Alex. Do you think this lived up to the hype?
I mean, the bottom line is yes. There is no more pure vehicle that both has capability and lifestyle. I mean, I don't use lifestyle in kind of a derogatory way. I mean, you can do the things you want to do and feel the way you want to feel in a Jeep. The top comes off, the doors come off, the windshield folds down really quickly and easily. It's got a solid front axle. It's got legitimate four-wheel drive. I have trouble not seeing it as the most desirable midsize pickup. But that's, I mean, I don't know that it would be the best choice for every person. I personally would probably lean Ranger just because I could do 95% of what the Wrangler could do for a little bit less money, a little more livability. But, God, I mean, on cool factor, there's Gladiator like a million feet in the air, and then there's Ranger, and then there's everything else just way, way below in my mind. So it's definitely a win for Jeep. There's no other way to put it. I can't wait for the diesel. I really hope they do a hybrid, because where this truck doesn't win is fuel economy and emissions. That's not why people are buying it, but I mean, at some point we should all be calling it what it is, which is kind of an indulgence, right? It's a lot of truck. It's not very fuel efficient. It's not very economical. That's not why people are buying it, but it could be all those things and still a Gladiator. So I would love, I'd love a plug-in hybrid.
Cool.
Version of this.
That would be the one I would select as well in my, ideal situation. Jeremy, your verdict, sir.
So in terms of whether it lives up to the hype, I mean, it does. I can't think of any way that it was like a letdown. It drives at least as well as anyone is going to expect it to. The pricing is in the ballpark. When I did some comparison with like some Tacoma TRDs, whether you get the TRD Sport or the TRD Pro. As Alex alluded to, you can get the Ranger with the FX4 off-road package. I looked at a Colorado ZR2. I priced all of those things, and it basically proved to me that the Gladiator is not priced wrong. That's what they're going for. That's what these trucks cost. So yeah, does it live up to the hype? Absolutely. Would I buy one? Yeah, I would. I had that conversation with our video producer who was in the car with me, and he just point blank asked about 3/4 of the way through the drive. And maybe it was the fact that I was having fun. It was a nice road. I was driving a nice black Rubicon with the top mostly off, a 6-speed manual, windows down. And it was a pretty day. And I was thinking, yeah, this is what I'd buy. And for those, for exactly the reasons that you'd think. It checks the box of being a fine daily driver, with the caveat that the emissions are not great and the fuel economy is pretty terrible. But it works as a daily driver. It works as a pickup truck. It's got the utility that I'd be looking for. No compromises in payload or towing capabilities. It can go off-road for the times that I want to do that, which it wouldn't be a lot, but when I wanted to, it'd be ready for it. In the winter, it's a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And in the summer, I can take the top off. I can take the doors off potentially. And I can sit back and chill on a nice fun drive with the wind in my hair. It checks a lot of boxes in one vehicle. I think it's just going to be really, really popular.
Cool. I think not having driven it, I'm inclined to agree that it does live up to the hype. I'm super excited to drive this thing. It's probably the single most, it's the vehicle that I'm most excited about driving this year. So that says something considering we get a lot of cars through the fleet. I think the price is somewhat reasonable when you consider all the capability that you get. Some of the other competitors, you've got to add some options on to get that even basic level of capability that the Wrangler offers. I feel like Jeep went ahead and was able to put this at the top of the class, which is important when you're going to enter into a new segment. You want to give people a true reason to convert, and I think they did that. I think it's a good mission for any company to have in any segment, but I think in this one it's especially critical because there's a lot of good products. So I'm super excited about this, and great work for both of you guys out there getting to drive this thing, your reviews, your videos. Be sure to check all of those on Autoblog.com. We'll have Alex's drive-away video. Those will be coming up a little bit later, but definitely check out Jeremy's take on this from last week. I'll give you a little bit of a teaser, too. We are going to put the Gladiator head-to-head with the Ranger, the Colorado, and the Tacoma, I believe, a few other of the mid-sized trucks. We're going to do a test in northern Michigan. It's going to happen in early May, so look for the video and the write-up from that coming up this summer. Should be exciting as well. So if you can't get enough Gladiator or other mid-sized trucks, I think we're doing what we can to satisfy your appetite. So with that, hope you enjoyed this sort of special edition of the Autoblog Podcast, Gladiator exclusive. Be safe out there, whether you're on or off the trail. We'll see you next time.